Episode 1. The Girl Who Dreamed of Nightmares. Most people fear the dark. Jade Anderson had always found it rather comforting. There was something deliciously honest about shadows, something she appreciated in a world that painted everything in pastels and pretended monsters didn't exist. But Jade knew better. She'd always known better. At 5'1", with a wild tangle of frizzy red curls that refused to be tamed no matter how much product she threw at them, Jade Anderson was used to not fitting in. While other women her age were pinning aesthetic cottagecore inspiration boards and dreaming of fairy tale weddings, Jade was curled up in her apartment wearing oversized royal blue sweaters, reading true crime forums and laughing at dark jokes that would make most people uncomfortable. She liked the color royal blue. Always had. Something about the depth of it, the way it sat right on that edge between beautiful and bruising, spoke to her soul. Her apartment reflected this too. Deep blue curtains, midnight blue throw pillows, a collection of gothic novels with beautiful dark covers arranged on shelves painted in shades of navy and indigo. Her friends, the few who understood her particular brand of weird, called it beautifully morbid. Her mother called it concerning. Jade called it home. But lately, home hadn't felt quite so safe. Not because of anything in the waking world, mind you. No, the disturbance came from somewhere far more intimate, her dreams. It started 3 weeks ago. Nothing dramatic at first, just an awareness. That feeling you get when you're alone in a room, but you absolutely know, that you're being watched. Jade would find herself walking through dreamscapes that shifted and melted like Salvador Dali had taken up architecture, and she'd feel it. Him. A presence that tracked her movements with interest that felt almost predatory. Most people would have woken up terrified. Jade woke up intrigued. The dreams grew more vivid after that, more detailed, as if whatever was creating them was learning what she liked, what made her pulse quicken, what drew her deeper instead of pushing her away. 2 nights ago, she dreamed of a boiler room. Pipes hissed and clanked overhead, wreathed in steam that glowed amber in the half-light. The air tasted of rust and something else, something darker that she couldn't quite name. The heat was oppressive, the kind that makes your skin slick with sweat and your breath come shallow. And she felt him there, closer than ever before, watching from the shadows between the pipes, waiting. Her heart had hammered in her chest, but not entirely from fear. There was something else mixed in there, something that made her skin prickle with awareness and anticipation rather than terror. She called out into the darkness, "I know you're there." The steam had shifted, and for just a moment she'd seen the suggestion of a shape, tall, male, dangerous. And then she'd woken up, gasping, her royal blue sheets tangled around her legs, and her heart racing like she'd just run a marathon. Tonight was different though. Tonight, as Jade settled into bed wearing her favorite oversized blue nightshirt, she wasn't afraid of what waited in her dreams. She was eager for it. She'd spent the evening as she usually did, microwave dinner, a documentary about Victorian mourning practices that made her laugh at the absurdity of human grief turned into elaborate ritual, a glass of wine, maybe 2, and then bed, with her wild red hair splayed across the pillow and her small frame barely making a dent in the queen-sized mattress. As her eyes grew heavy, Jade found herself smiling. Come on then, she thought as sleep pulled her under. Show yourself. The dream began differently this time. She was aware, lucid in a way she hadn't been before. The boiler room materialized around her with startling clarity. Every detail was sharp, hyper-real, the condensation dripping from pipes, the graffiti on the walls, words she couldn't quite read but felt were important. The furnace in the corner, its door hanging open to reveal fire that danced with colors fire shouldn't be. The heat wrapped around her like a physical thing, making her skin glow with perspiration. Her nightshirt clung to her curves, and she was suddenly very aware of how small she was in this vast industrial nightmare. Interesting choice, she said aloud, her voice echoing off the metal walls. The boiler room aesthetic, very American industrial gothic. I appreciate the commitment to atmosphere. Silence answered her, but it was a listening silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums. Jade walked deeper into the maze of pipes and shadows, her bare feet soundless on the corroded floor. She should be terrified. She knew that, logically. Young woman, alone in what was clearly meant to be a nightmarescape. Every horror movie she'd ever seen said she should be running, screaming, trying to wake up. But Jade had never been very good at doing what she was supposed to. You've been watching me for weeks now, she continued, trailing her fingers along a pipe that was hot enough to burn but didn't. Dream logic. Following me through my sleep like some kind of supernatural stalker. Which, not gonna lie, is either really creepy or really hot, and I haven't quite decided which yet. A sound echoed through the boiler room. Low. Amused. Not quite a laugh, but close. Jade's pulse quickened, and she felt that delicious shiver run down her spine. The one that sits right on the border between fear and desire, making your body unsure whether to run toward or away from danger. There you are, she whispered, turning slowly in a circle. Come on, mystery man. I've been dreaming of you every night. The least you could do is show your face. Careful what you wish for, little girl. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, rough as gravel and dark as midnight. It slithered through the air like smoke, wrapping around her, and Jade felt the heat pool low in her belly that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Little girl? Jade laughed, and the sound was sharp and fearless. Oh, honey, if you think I'm gonna play the trembling victim, you've been stalking the wrong woman. Another sound, closer this time. Definitely a laugh. The shadows between the pipes seemed to thicken, to coalesce into something almost solid. I like you, the voice purred. Most people are screaming by now. Most people are boring, Jade shot back, and I've never been most people. No, the voice agreed, and now it seemed to be circling her, moving through the darkness. No, you're not. You're something else entirely, aren't you, Jade? Hearing her name in that voice sent electricity crackling down her spine. He knew her name, of course he did. He'd been in her dreams for weeks, sifting through her subconscious like pages in a book. You have me at a disadvantage, she said, trying to track his movement through the shadows. You know my name. Seems only fair, I know yours. Fair? The amusement in his voice was thicker now. You think this is about fair? I think, Jade said slowly, turning to face the darkest corner of the boiler room, where the shadows seemed deepest, that you're stalling. All this time watching me, waiting, building up to this moment, and now you're playing coy. What's wrong? Afraid I won't like what I see. The silence that followed was different, charged. She'd struck a nerve, challenged him, and Jade felt the fierce satisfaction at having rattled her nightmare stalker. Oh, sweetheart, the voice said, and now it was directly behind her, close enough that she could feel breath on the back of her neck that shouldn't exist in dreams. You're gonna like it too much. That's the problem. Jade turned, and finally, the shadows peeled back just enough. She could see the suggestion of him, tall, broader than she'd imagined, the glint of something metal in the darkness, a hat, brim low and menacing, and eyes. God, those eyes. They caught the amber light from the furnace and reflected it back like a cat's, burning with an intensity that should have made her run. Instead, Jade took a step closer. Try me, she whispered. The presence pulled back slightly, and she could sense surprise rippling through the dream. You really aren't afraid, are you? There was wonder in that terrible voice now, mixed with something darker, something hungry. Of you? Jade tilted her head, her wild red curls cascading over one shoulder. I'm terrified. I can feel my heart trying to break out of my chest. But fear isn't the same as wanting to run. Some things are worth being scared of. Some things are worth walking toward even when everything in you is screaming danger. Dangerous, the voice agreed. That's exactly what I am, Jade. I'm the thing parents warn their children about. I'm a monster that hides in sleep. I'm death dressed up in nightmares, and everyone who meets me ends up screaming. Then I guess I'm about to ruin your perfect record, Jade said, and smiled into the darkness. Because I don't scare easy, and I've always had terrible taste in men. The laugh that echoed through the boiler room was rich and genuine, tinged with darkness, but also with something that sounded almost like delight. Oh, Jade Anderson, the voice said, and the shadows began to shift again, drawing closer. I think you and I are going to have so much fun together. The dream began to pulse, the edges growing softer as sleep tried to pull her deeper or perhaps push her toward waking. Jade fought against it, not ready to leave, not when she was finally getting somewhere. Don't go, she heard herself say. I want to see you, really see you. Patience, the voice whispered, and she felt something brush against her cheek. A touch that was there and not there, gentle and terrible, all at once. We have all the time in the world now. Every time you close your eyes, I'll be waiting. And next time, little Jade, next time, I won't hide in the shadows. Promise? The word came out breathier than she'd intended. Oh, I promise. Sweet dreams, beautiful. And then the boiler room was dissolving, melting away into the formless gray of deep sleep, and Jade was falling back toward consciousness. She woke, gasping, her body flushed and trembling. The morning light was just beginning to creep around the edges of her royal blue curtains, painting her bedroom in shades of dawn. Her nightshirt was soaked with sweat, clinging to her skin, her pulse was racing. And she was smiling. Jade lay there in her tangled sheets, staring up at the ceiling, and pressed a hand to her racing heart. She could still feel the echo of that presence, still hear the dark velvet of that voice wrapping around her name. Most people would be terrified, would be looking up how to prevent nightmares, researching sleep aids, maybe even considering therapy. Jade reached for her phone and set an alarm for an early bedtime. She had a feeling tonight's dream was going to be one she didn't want to miss, and whatever was waiting for her in the shadows, whatever monster had been stalking her sleep, he finally showed his hand. He was interested, more than interested. He was intrigued by her fearlessness, charmed by her sharp tongue, drawn to her in a way that felt mutual and magnetic. As Jade got out of bed and padded toward her bathroom, catching sight of her reflection in the mirror with her wild red hair and flushed cheeks and eyes bright with anticipation, she made a decision. If he wanted to play in her dreams, she'd play right back. If he wanted to test her, see how brave she really was, she'd show him bravery that bordered on recklessness. And if he wanted to terrify her, well, Jade had always had a thing for dangerous men. She just never thought she'd fall for one who only existed in nightmares. Tonight, she thought as she turned on the shower, letting royal blue steam fill the bathroom, tonight you show yourself, all of yourself. And somewhere in the space between waking and sleeping, in the realm where nightmares are born, something ancient and terrible smiled with anticipation. The hunt had begun. But for the first time in his long, dark existence, the hunter wasn't entirely sure who was chasing whom. Episode 2, An Unusual First Encounter. Freddy Krueger had been murdering teenagers in their dreams for longer than he cared to count. He knew the script by heart, the slow reveal, the mounting terror, the delicious moment when they realized there was no escape, no waking up, no mercy, and then the screaming. God, he loved the screaming. Tonight was supposed to be no different. He'd been circling this one for weeks now, Jade Anderson, the little redhead with the smart mouth and the royal blue everything. She caught his attention in ways his victims usually didn't. Most of them were interchangeable, boring, forgettable except for their fear. But Jade? She'd walked through his carefully constructed nightmares like she was browsing a museum, commenting on the aesthetics, making jokes, calling out to him like they were playing hide and seek instead of a game of predator and prey. It should have annoyed him. Should have made him want to tear into her faster, harder, show her exactly what happened to little girls who didn't know their place in the food chain. Instead, it had fascinated him. So tonight, he decided to stop teasing, stop lurking in the shadows. Tonight, Freddy Krueger was going to make his grand entrance, show her the full glory of what hunted her, and finally get that scream he'd been craving. Jade fell asleep at 9 p.m., which was adorably early, and told him everything he needed to know about how eager she was for this. He felt her consciousness slip into the dream realm like a fish diving into dark water, and he grinned as he pulled her exactly where he wanted her. The boiler room materialized around her, his domain, his hunting ground, every detail perfect. The heat that pressed against skin like a physical weight, the steam that carried the whispers of the children he killed before his own death, the furnace that breathed and hungered like a living thing. Jade appeared in the center of it all, wearing that oversized blue nightshirt that somehow managed to be both innocent and tempting. Her wild red hair caught the amber light from the furnace, making her look like she was already burning. She looked around, taking in the scene with those sharp eyes, and Freddy waited for it. The moment of realization, the fear that would blossom across her face when she understood she wasn't in control here. Instead, Jade smiled. Well, she said, her voice cutting through the hiss of steam and groan of pipes. This is new. You've really committed to the ambiance tonight. I half expect Vincent Price to narrate. Freddy blinked in the shadows. That wasn't the right line. She was supposed to be calling out nervously, or better yet, whimpering. You know, Jade continued, walking deeper into the boiler room like she owned it. Most guys try dinner and a movie for a first date. But I guess when you're a supernatural entity who only exists in dreams, you work with what you've got. Okay, that was actually funny. Freddy felt his grin widening despite himself. Fine, let her have a brave little moment. It would make the fear sweeter when it finally came. He decided to make his entrance from above. Classic technique. He dropped from the pipes with a metallic shriek of his bladed glove against metal, landing directly in front of her with a solid thud that should have made her jump back. Jade tilted her head and looked up at him, all 5'1" of her, staring up at 6 feet of burned nightmare in a fedora and a striped sweater, wearing a glove with knives for fingers. Her eyes went wide, finally. Here it came. The scream, the terror, the delicious moment of breaking. Holy shit, Jade breathed. You're Freddy Krueger. Freddy paused. That was not the reaction he'd expected. There was awe in her voice, yes, but not the right kind. She sounded like she'd just met a celebrity. The scream went slasher, Jade continued, and she took a step closer instead of away, those sharp eyes roaming over him with undisguised curiosity. The bastard son of 100 maniacs, dream demon, child killer turned teenage nightmare. She laughed, and it was bright and slightly unhinged. Oh my god, I'm being haunted by an actual legend. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Freddy stared at her. In all his years of murder, no one had ever called being stalked by him the best thing that had ever happened to them. You're supposed to be screaming, he heard himself say, his rough voice coming out confused instead of menacing. Why? Jade asked, genuinely curious. I mean, yeah, you're terrifying. That face could stop a clock, no offense. Plenty taken, Freddy growled. But screaming seems redundant at this point, Jade continued, circling him slowly, and Freddy found himself actually turning to keep her in view because what the hell was happening? I knew something was hunting me. I knew you were dangerous. Screaming isn't going to change that, and honestly, it seems rude. You've put all this effort into atmosphere, the dramatic entrance, the whole thing. The least I can do is appreciate the craftsmanship. She stopped directly in front of him again, craning her neck to look up at his ruined face, the face that had sent countless teenagers into hysterics, the burned, melted nightmare of features that reflected exactly what the vengeful parents of Springwood had done to him. Jade studied him like he was art. Does it hurt? She asked softly, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, not disgust. Being burned like that, in the dreams, I mean, can you still feel it? Freddy felt something shift in his chest, something that hadn't moved in decades. He reached out with his gloved hand, the blades catching the light, and traced one knife tip down her cheek, not cutting, just touching. The blades whispered against her skin, a promise of what he could do. I can make you feel it, he said, his voice dropping into that predatory purr that usually preceded a kill. I can make you feel things you can't imagine. Pain that goes on forever. Terror that never ends. I can unmake you, little girl, piece by piece, night after night, until there's nothing left but screaming. Jade's pulse was visible in her throat, hammering like a trapped bird. Good, there was the fear, finally. But then she smiled up at him, and her eyes were fever bright. You could, she agreed, but you won't. Won't I? Freddy let the blades trail down her neck, across her collarbone, watching her shiver. No, she sounded absolutely certain, because if you wanted to kill me, we'd have done it already. You had weeks. But instead, you've been watching, following, building up to this moment. She paused, then added with devastating accuracy, You're interested in me. Freddy snatched his hand back like she'd burned him. Interested? I'm a predator, sweetheart. You're food. That's not interest. That's hunger. Liar, Jade said cheerfully. If I was just food, I'd already be dead. But I'm not. I'm standing here, trading banter with the Springwood slasher, and you're letting me. She stepped even closer, close enough that he could smell her, something sweet and alive that made his fingers flex in the glove. You're curious about me, about why I'm not afraid. Or no, that's not right. I am afraid. I'm fucking terrified. But I'm also the most turned on I've been in my entire life. And you can tell, can't you? You can feel it. She wasn't wrong. He could feel it, the heat radiating off her that had nothing to do with the boiler room's temperature, could sense the way her fear and desire were tangled together into something he'd never encountered before. It made him want to cut her open just to see what she looked like inside. It made him want to kiss her until she stopped being so fucking brave. Both impulses were equally disturbing. You're insane, Freddy said flatly. Probably, Jade agreed. I have terrible taste in men. My last boyfriend was a true crime podcaster who practiced his episodes at 3 a.m. and cried during rom-coms. Before that, a tattoo artist with anger issues and a substance problem. And now, apparently unattracted to a dead child murderer who exists in dreams. So, yeah, my therapist would have a field day with this. Despite himself, Freddy laughed. It came out rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in a while, because joy wasn't an emotion he felt anymore. Malicious glee, yes. Sadistic pleasure, absolutely. But actual amusement? That was new, or old. So old, he'd forgotten what it felt like. You're not like the others, he said, and it came out almost accusatory. Thank God, Jade replied. The others were boring, probably screamed a lot, very predictable. She reached out suddenly, before he could react, and ran her fingertips along the blade of his glove. The metal was sharp enough to slice dreams, but she touched it like she was petting something dangerous. These are beautiful, in a fucked up kind of way. Did you make them yourself? After I died, Freddy heard himself answering. In the dream realm, you become what you were in life, but more, distilled. I was already a monster. Death just made me honest about it. Honest monster, Jade mused. I like that. Better than the regular kind, who pretend they're good people. She was still touching his glove, tracing the blades with a delicate finger that should have been bleeding, but wasn't, because this was his dream, and he hadn't decided to cut her yet. The yet was starting to feel less certain. Why aren't you running? Freddy asked, and he genuinely wanted to know. Everyone runs. Even the brave ones eventually run. Jade looked up at him, and her eyes were storm grey and completely fearless. Because I've been alone my whole life, she said simply. Never fit in. Never found someone who understood the way I see the world. Everyone thinks I'm weird, or morbid, or too much. But you, she laughed softly. You're literally made of nightmares. You think I'm interesting, maybe even fascinating. I can feel it, Freddy. You're in my head. You know everything about me, and you're still here, still watching, still wanting to know more. She paused. Why would I run from the first person, dead or alive, who actually sees me? The words hit him like a furnace blast, because they were true. He had been watching her, learning her, fascinated by the way her mind worked. The dark humor, the fearlessness that bordered on reckless, the way she found beauty in shadows. She reminded him of someone. Himself, before the world taught him that monsters had to hide. You don't know what you're asking for, Freddy said, his voice rough. I'm not the hero of this story, Jade. I'm not going to save you, or love you, or give you some kind of redemption arc. I'm a killer. It's what I am. What I'll always be. I don't want a hero, Jade said, and she stepped right up against him, her small body pressing against his tall frame with absolutely no sense of self-preservation. Heroes are boring. I want someone who understands darkness because they live in it. Someone who won't flinch when I laugh at horrible things or find beauty in the macabre. I want someone who sees the monster in me and doesn't run away. Her hand came up, hesitating for just a moment before touching his face. The ruined, burned flesh that was more nightmare than human. Her fingers were gentle, tracing the melted features with a tenderness that made something in Freddy's chest crack. Besides, she whispered, you already saved me. Every night for 3 weeks, you gave me something to look forward to. Made me feel less alone. Made me feel seen. That's more than any living man has ever done. Freddy stared down at her, this impossible little woman who should be screaming, who should be begging, who should be anything except standing here touching his face like it was something precious. And he realized with dawning horror that she was right. He was interested, more than interested. In his own twisted way, he'd been courting her, building up to this moment not to kill her, but to meet her, to see if she was as fascinating up close as she'd been from the shadows. You're going to ruin me, he said roughly. Good, Jade replied, and went up on her toes, bringing her face close to his. Ruin me back. For a long moment, they stood there, caught between nightmare and desire, between fear and fascination. The boiler room pulsed around them, breathing with heat and darkness. Then Freddy made a decision that would change everything. He wrapped one arm around her waist, careful with the bladed glove, and yanked her fully against him. She gasped, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, and he leaned down until his ruined mouth was close to her ear. "Okay, little Jade," he whispered, his voice dark velvet and sharp edges. "You want to dance with the devil? Let's dance. But don't say I didn't warn you when you can't tell the difference between dreaming and waking anymore. When you can't tell where you end and I begin. When I've crawled so deep inside your head that you'll never be free of me." "Promises, promises," Jade breathed, and her smile was wild and reckless and absolutely unafraid. Freddy laughed again, that rusty, forgotten sound, and tightened his grip on her. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" "The worst kind," Jade agreed. "But you love it." And the terrible thing was, she might be right. The dream began to shift around them, responding to Freddy's will, but also to something else, something new. Jade's desires mixing with his, creating something that was neither nightmare nor normal dream, but somewhere in between. The boiler room stayed, but it became less threatening. The steam carried the scent of her perfume now. The heat felt more like a caress than an assault. The shadows deepened, but grew intimate instead of menacing. "So," Jade said, still pressed against him, her wild red hair brushing against his chest. "Now what? Is there a manual for dream demon courtship? Because I left mine in my other nightmare." "Courtship," Freddy repeated, tasting the word. "That's not usually how this goes." "Nothing about this is usual," Jade pointed out. "Might as well embrace it." She wasn't wrong. Nothing about this was remotely in his playbook. He should kill her, or at the very least, torment her until she learned proper fear. That's what he did. That's what he was. But instead, he found himself asking, "What do you want, Jade? Really want?" She considered this, her grey eyes thoughtful. "I want to know you, not Freddy Krueger the legend. You, the person under the monster. I want to know what makes you laugh besides fear. What you dream about when you're not busy giving other people nightmares. I want to know if something that's been dead as long as you have can still feel anything real." "That's a dangerous curiosity," Freddy warned. "I excel at dangerous," Jade replied. He studied her for a long moment, this impossible woman who met his nightmare with fascination instead of fear. Then he made another decision that surprised even him. "All right," he said. "You want to know me? Let's start with the truth. I do dream, sometimes, when I'm between hunts. And do you know what I dream about?" "What?" Jade asked softly. "Being alive again," Freddy said, and the honesty of it was like a blade sliding between his own ribs. Feeling the sun, tasting food, touching someone without knives in the way. Being human again, just for a moment, before remembering why I stopped wanting to be human in the first place." Jade's expression softened, and she reached out to cup his ruined face with both hands. "Then be human with me," she whispered. "Here, in the dreams. We can be anything we want here, right? You're the master of this realm, so be human for me. Even if it's only for tonight. Even if it's only for tonight." And Freddy realized she was offering him something no one had offered in decades. Not forgiveness, because she wasn't naive enough to think he deserved that, but acceptance, understanding, a moment of connection in an existence that had been nothing but isolation and hunger. It was manipulation, probably, some kind of game she was playing. Except he was in her head, and he knew it wasn't. She meant every word with terrifying sincerity. "You're gonna destroy me," he said again, but this time it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a prophecy. "Then we'll destroy each other," Jade said, "and build something new from the rubble." The dream shifted again, and Freddy let the monster facade crack just enough to show her what was underneath. Not human, not anymore, but not entirely demon either. Something in between, something that remembered what it was like to want connection instead of just fear. He pulled her closer, and she came willingly, this small, fierce woman who should have been his victim, but had somehow become something else entirely. "You're insane," he told her. "So are you," she replied. "That's why this works." And in the heat of the boiler room, surrounded by steam and shadows, Freddy Krueger did something he hadn't done since before his death. He let himself feel something other than hunger. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was going to end in blood and madness, because everything he touched did. But for tonight, in this moment, with this impossible woman pressed against him like she belonged there, Freddy let himself have something he thought was lost forever. Connection, desire, something that felt almost like hope, if hope could exist in the heart of a nightmare. "Stay," he heard himself say. "Don't wake up yet. Stay here with me." "I'm not going anywhere," Jade promised, and her smile was bright and fierce and completely unafraid. The dream deepened around them, becoming more real, more solid. No longer his nightmare or her dream, but something they were creating together, the space between waking and sleeping, where monsters and the women who loved them could exist without apology. And somewhere in the waking world, Jade's body lay peacefully in her blue-sheeted bed, a smile on her sleeping face. While in the dream realm, Freddy Krueger held her close and realized he'd just made a terrible mistake. He let her matter. And things that mattered could be lost, could be taken away, could hurt in ways that pain and death never could. But as Jade laughed at something he said, her voice bright in the darkness, Freddy decided that maybe, just maybe, the risk was worth it. After all, what was the point of being a nightmare if you couldn't occasionally dream?